its large brown eyes already staring into the great hereafter. Then the shaking begins, not from fear, but the release of it, not from excitement, but from the expiring of tension. The smile on my face is painful. The exhilaration is complete. Surely there can be no more thrilling experience. What does that say to you about this man?
He's not like me. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's an interesting account, really, because you think, what do we know as human beings? Well, we know we're all mortal, and we know that we're all going to die one day. And it's interesting because serial killers, people who kill other human beings repeatedly, but sometimes talk about this power of death and so on. And one way of dealing with fear of death is to watch other people die. And you think there's something kind of deep and sinister about wanting to watch an animal die like this. It's something that most of us would want to turn our eyes away from. And you think, is this a mechanism to deal with our own mortality? Really, it's by sacrificing other living beings to. I have to say that is quite a disturbing quote. Really,
Now, we know that some serial killers and other very serious offenders have, almost started, if you like, their criminal careers by engaging in acts of animal cruelty or being exposed to them. Do you think there is a link between the gratuitous taking of a life of a non-human animal and a risk of violent behavior in society? And it's almost, you've brought the analogy of terrorists in a few times when, talking about the understanding the motivations of trophy hunters. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Are these people, the people who go on trophy hunting, are they potentially a threat to society? Is this something that we should be taking more seriously in the UK in the same way that perhaps, elsewhere it has? So, for example, the FBI now classifies animal cruelty or things like dogfighting, as a grade A felony and uses it actually to catch very serious offenders, people involved in, guns and drug crimes, etc. Is that a frame of mind that we need to be importing here?
Yeah, in the book, I mentioned one study by Cavanagh, Signal and Taylor in 2013, which analysed the relationship between the dark triad, which is psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, and aggression and criminality, and pointed out that animal cruelty is a red flag indicator for the propensity to engage in violent antisocial behaviour, including intimate partner abuse, some research on that, intra-family violence, sexual assault, and bullying, etc., etc. And they assessed attitudes towards animals using an attitude towards treatment of animals scale. Had indicated the extent to which they were bothered by certain acts towards animals, including intentionally killing a wild animal while hunting. The participants were also asked about behaviour in which they engaged. Have you ever intentionally killed an animal that was owned by yourself or by someone else for no good reason? And the analysis revealed that less positive attitudes towards animals were associated with higher levels of narcissism, higher levels of Machiavellianism, higher levels of psychopathy. In addition, the composite dark triad score was also correlated with attitudes to animals, and high levels of psychopathy were associated with actual behaviour, not just attitudinal measures, etc., etc. So the answer is it certainly kind of indicates something, I think, early cruelty to animals. And it indicates something in which you can see that other types of antisocial behaviours and violent behaviours would also derive from. In terms of a direct causal mechanism, have you ever killed a pet or something, and something, obviously that's much more difficult to say, but it's clearly, if you engage in cruelty to animals, there's clearly an issue there about power relationships, about pleasure derived from it, problems to do with empathy, problems to do with callousness, problems to do with what you prefer to do to get some attention from others, perhaps. So I think it is a real issue, and it's something that, of course, clinicians would kind of look out for. they would look out for early experience of animal cruelty as being kind of indicative of a certain personality type. So I think there are clearly issues there. And again, I mean, if someone was boasting about trophy hunting as a young boy, again, you might want to think about that as indicative of a certain kind of personality. And we know that the problem with psychopathy as a dimension is it is clearly a dimension, but we know that it represents 1% of the population, but we know that people who are in prisons, the percentage is much, much higher. So there is clearly a type of personality associated with this kind of behaviour, which seems to be associated with many of the problems in society. So it's clearly an issue and something that needs to be looked out for.
Okay. It was quite I think any interview involving Piers Morgan will be interesting for one reason or another. But anyway, there was a particular interview that Piers Morgan did with a trophy hunter and his daughter. So his daughter, I think, was 12 years old. She shot a giraffe and they both had posted lots of pictures on the internet, on social media about it. And so obviously this caused quite a lot of, comment and criticism. And Piers Morgan interviewed them on his show. And he says, well, look, you've got a pet cat. What if I came and shot your pet cat? What would you feel about that? And they couldn't understand why he was asking the question. In other words, how it is relevant to the fact that they had killed an animal for sport. And he was saying, well, I can kill an animal for sport as well. But, cats, domestic cats and giraffes, I mean, almost, on totally different planets. And I mean, how do you explain that disconnect?
It is a really interesting disconnect, actually. And again, I found one interesting article about the so-called love-hate relationship, which is, they want to get close to animals. With trophy hunting, what they're saying is it's a way of getting close for all time with the animal by ending its life. But they would want to discriminate between killing those and killing other types of animals. Now, I suppose what you have to think is, look, if trophy hunting is about satisfying these kind of primitive urges about narcissism and psychopathy, it's satisfying the narcissistic urge, and psychopathy allows it, because if you're that callous and no empathy and no emotional response, then it allows you to do it. Then of course, the argument is quite a simple one, which is killing your own cat wouldn't satisfy that narcissistic urge, because there's, why would anyone think, oh my God, what an achievement. Did you kill the cat when it was having its breakfast this morning? It's like, wow, it's not going to work. It's not going to satisfy the urge, you see. So if you think about it in terms of the urges which trophy hunting would satisfy, then the delineation, I think, is pretty straightforward. But the interesting question then is how it could be expanded outwards. What range of things does satisfy it? So, shooting, I mean, let's make a ludicrous example, but shooting an elephant when it's asleep, does that allow you to feel good about yourself? Well, maybe, because what you've got is the dead animal, and it's that image which draws the urge. Could you imagine someone posing with their dead cat? Saying, it's like, wow, this is what I did this morning. It's like, do you see? So it's kind of understandable. It's not that they hate animals. What they want to do is they want to use the animals. They want to use the big five or whatever to make themselves feel good in a particular way, to satisfy a crude, primitive urge for status, and to be looked up to and to get attention. And domestic animals don't satisfy that. Although, interestingly, some trophy hunters with the extreme personalities may well have engaged in domestic animal abuse much earlier in life.
So when all is said and done, I mean, how do you equate trophy hunting? How do you look upon it? Is it sort of one of those, arguably a social moral evil like apartheid or slavery, which of course there were also people who at the time justified on moral grounds, ethical welfare grounds, etc. But how do you what's your sort of final conclusion? Is it something as well that you think will eventually be abolished, and that future generations will sort of, in 50 years time, perhaps sort of look back and think, my goodness, were people still doing